Welcome to the How Did I Get Here podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Poley, and this is a conversation I had with Steve Newman, the salesperson for Regalis Food in Chicago. Steve Newman, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Really excited to talk to you today. So as the podcast goes, we always talk about how you got started in the industry, why you stuck with the industry, and then we'll move on to the exciting things that you're doing now. So what attracted you, first of all, to get into cooking?
I was a little shithead. I was a high school dropout. Didn't really know what to do. And I don't know, it's like the one thing that I can do that you didn't need a degree for, and that like all the other like degenerates I hung out with, they seem to, you know, I'm going to say do better at work than they did in their regular lives or their normal lives. So I started as a dishwasher and kind of just stuck with it until something clicked and it made sense to move into better restaurants and bigger restaurants, and started cooking, and did it for in the better part of 13 or 14 years. Or
really,
like that, yeah.
Where was the first breakout restaurant? Like, what was the big one that you're like, wow, I'm in it?
If there was one, the first one was there's a place called Allium in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and it's like when like farm to table was real big. You know, it's like the menu that like you had to read all of the names of all the farms before you got to the actual product. Yeah. There and this cafe also in Great Barrington, run by this guy Matt Rubiner, is like a legendary cheesemonger. Mm-hmm. And those were the two places where I was like understood food as something more than just substance.
Yeah, right.
You know, and like was like, oh, this is I can make like a career out of this. Mm-hmm. I can do this for like a long-term thing. It's like when I started being able to think about time as more than just like today and the next couple weeks, and I could start like planning a life. Right. You know,
I think that's a big realization in every cook's life, especially if you're young out of high school, where you start cooking and you may be thinking about going to college. You might just be doing this for fun or money, and then it gets to the point where you're like, oh, this could actually be something. If I go through the right steps and the right process, this could be like a career, if you would, you know? I feel like it's like a rite of passage for most cooks.
I think so. I mean, like, I definitely was attracted to what I thought were like the expectations that of what like a cook should be like. Like, I was definitely very enamored in the lifestyle part of it as much as I was enamored in the craft. Mm-hmm. Like, right when I first started cooking, somebody had given me a copy of Devil in the Kitchen, mm-hmm. and it was like this like earth-shattering, like, oh, I didn't know like I could have like I want to be like that, you know, and like ultimately it was probably the wrong way to think.
Right.
But I was 18 years old. I thought it was the coolest thing.
Mm-hmm. What do you say the lifestyle? Was it the rock and roll, hanging out all night, smoking cigarettes, drinking warm whiskey at a bar, and then like
100%.
Yeah.
It was like being an absolute disaster, except while you're at work.
Yeah, right.
My clothes are dirty, but my station is nice,
pristine,
and tidy,
right?
and organized, and.
Yeah. I haven't slept in days, but when I'm here, I'm still cranking out delicious food.
Yeah, I thought that was the coolest thing in the world.
Well, I think that was just, it's not you thought it was the coolest thing. I think there was not a misrepresentation, but the stereotype was so thick.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that it's this is it. You're going to cook. This is what you're going to do, you know?
Yeah. It doesn't matter how hungover you are when like you show up to work early,
right?
You stay late, you get paid like garbage, and you're told you have to get paid.
It's an honor to work for us.
It's an honor to get paid like this.
Right. How'd you get to Chicago?
I moved it, so from Miami to Gainesville, back to Miami to Massachusetts to Indiana, pretty much following a girl the whole time.
Covering all the greatest food capitals in the United States. Huh?
Pork tenderloin sandwiches.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to come to Chicago because I had gotten, like, the first time I came here, I was 15 or 16. I thought it was the coolest city I'd ever been to. And it was just, like, so not Miami. And it felt like a city that was, like, didn't just tear down things when they got old. Instead, they, like, just put something new in that old thing, you know. So I knew I wanted to come here, and in 2010, we moved here because I wanted to work at either I wanted to work for Paul Kahn, or I just wanted to work for one of these, like, big names at the time, and he was certainly the biggest name at the time.
Yeah, I mean, still is.
And I wound up working for Bruce Sherman. I was at North Pond for 2 years, which was like, you know, if you were coming to Chicago and you didn't know where to go, you probably wound up there, is what it seemed like at the time, you know. But then there was a lot of competition for cooks to work in restaurants. And I was wildly underpaid for a long time, but I don't know, it was like I was so kind of blown away with the quality of talent around me. Like, I wanted to be better, and I wanted to be the best. So it, like, I knew that if I was going to be the best, it was either going to be in Chicago, San Francisco, or New York.
Great cities.
But this was close.
Yeah.
And I could afford it, kind of, here.
Right. What'd you learn from Bruce Sherman?
How to work in a busy restaurant and not cut corners to do it. How to...
I mean, he got the best products too.
I would say how to.
He was, I mean, such
ask about where things were coming from. And
he's such a fanatic about products, I think, you know.
Yeah, not in a self patting on the back way.
No.
It just kind of is who he is, and it's ingrained in him. It was a hard fucking restaurant.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a busy restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, my station, I worked, like, when I first started, I was on Garde Manger, and I had like 76 items or something in my station, and we were doing, you know, between 120 and 150 on the weekend, which,
Jesus.
You know, and all the plates have like 13 touches to them.
Right.
It's hard,
That's
man.
a lot.
It was hard.
Yeah.
But Bruce liked me. I adapted. I came in with, like, really rough around the edges, and he told me what to do, and I listened to him, and he liked me. I know a lot of people who have worked there who did not have that experience, but I don't know, I'm a little East Coast Jewish boy, so maybe he...
Yeah, but that's like anywhere. Like, an experience in a restaurant or a job is so personal and custom that, you know, 5 people could say, oh, this is a great place, it just isn't for you. And what we talked to Greg Vernick about coming to the realization of something's just not for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people to realize. It may look at it as failure, or just because you didn't click with the team. There's a lot of reasons why it wouldn't be for you.
Well, a lot of people, I mean, I think, and this is probably, I don't know if this is changing. I think it's changing. The dominance of French fine dining has it so that people who don't want to do that, they think something's wrong with them. I mostly worked at fancy French restaurants for a long time.
Right.
That when I started to see how other people would do things, ways that I was like horrified by it. First, I was like, oh no, I'm wrong.
Yeah. Right.
Like when I saw somebody making Mexican food and dry cooking nuts and spices, I was like, what the fuck are you doing? I think it's you can get a better education now as a cook than 15 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's so much variety now.
I hope so.
Like you could
that's a good thing.
You could go to culinary school or not go to culinary school and get your start on a food truck, work into a brick and mortar.
Yeah.
You could start at the best restaurant and work at a counter service restaurant, and it's still going to be a great experience.
And I think COVID's probably changed that a lot too. A lot of people, I don't want to say have jumped their turn.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people have found more creative ways of making money that aren't completely nailed into I was going to say 9 to 5, but that is so wildly wrong.
What is a 9 to 5 these days? Doesn't even exist.
The noon to midnight structure.
So what happened after North Pond? Where'd you go?
I went to the Elysian Hotel. And I went from there. I worked at Ria in Balsan, which was like everything that I thought. Like if I thought that the one job was hard, this was like building up on that like 10 times. It was the first time I'd seen rulers come out in kitchens.
Yeah.
More than just like normal proverbial dick measuring. But like, when he said that these have to be an inch long, it wasn't like an inch long. Like it's exactly that. If this doesn't hit the plate at exactly, 6 o'clock on the plate, like something is wrong and you're redoing it.
Did you find that very sterile cooking or too precise? Or
it wasn't. There's a part of me that really loves that and wants that. And it's probably the part of me that isn't that at all. Like the most chaotic parts of me probably really look for these like super rigid, really, clean, sterile. But ultimately it's like, wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I went from there and I worked for Thomas Lenz at 16, which great chef, hard.
Yeah.
Super
He's got that
hard.
Robuchon French background,
Oh my God.
But disciplined. Fair? Would you say he's fair? Fair and disciplined?
It took me a while to see that. Maybe after I left.
Maybe after you left. Always hindsight. You know? Yeah.
But I would say yes, fair. Right. Just very, he told me when he sat me down before I took the job, and I think he probably told everybody this, but like, I'm going to break you down. And he did. But like, I felt way, way, way more confident when I left than when I got there. And felt like when I went to other restaurants, I could, I wasn't scared of anything.
Yeah, you hold your
anymore.
own. You can hold your own, and if you've kind of seen a lot by then,
Yeah, I could go to any kind of restaurant and feel pretty good and pretty confident. I was probably pretty cocky at this point, is my guess. And then, went from there to working for Andrew Zimmerman at Sepia. And that was also like, busy. Like busy and didn't cut corners. Yeah. And this was before Proxy was open. So Andrew was like in the kitchen with us every night.
Great, man.
And somebody I still very much consider to be a mentor. And went from kind of bounced around for a little bit. I worked pastry for a little while. I worked as a baker for a little bit and just tried to kind of learn as much as I could. And the last real thing I did before I left Chicago was I opened up a restaurant called Honey's with Charlie Welch.
Oh, right. Yeah, Charlie. Yeah.
And was there for the year before opening and then the year we first opened. And that's where I first started to like, I guess really like be a manager and like started to do the things that weren't just like, I have to set up a station. I have to make sure that I have enough of this for the night. I have to like work a service, but like trying to show other people how to organize their time. And I didn't really know where to go from there. You know, I had all these grandiose ideas and didn't really know what to do. And then my then girlfriend, now wife, wanted just to move somewhere else before we like settled down. And we, like a lot of people, went to Nashville and had like a great weekend. And we were like, oh yeah, we should move here.
It's always interesting when you visit a city for a couple days and you do the fun touristy things according to living there, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Totally
and then you
different.
live there and you realize that the touristy things are like bothersome and in your way and annoying, you know?
Yeah, we went down to Nashville and it's like, oh yeah, I think we can move down here. Like, and we moved down there for a year and a half. And then, yeah, the last restaurant I worked at was Catbird Seat.
Yeah. Terrible place.
Oh, awful.
Awful
the chef
place.
there, real schmuck.
Awful. What a dick.
But I mean, like, that was ultimately, I feel like, where everything led to.
To where you're at now.
Very much so. Like, that's where I learned. Really, I feel like that's where I learned hospitality. Like, I learned it partially from working more in hotels than in actual restaurants. But, like, you know how there's, like, always cooks who, it's like every order that comes in, they're like, oh, God.
Yeah.
Like, it's Saturday at 6 p.m.
Totally. Or 8:50 to close at 9:30. You're like, oh, God, they're, like, breaking their station down. You know?
All right. But, like, Catbird was where it was, like, you know, and I think big part of it was Matthew.
Yeah.
But a big part of it was like really being in front of people and talking to people and seeing them enjoy your labor gave me a completely different appreciation for hospitality and and clients and working with people. And like food's important, but it's sometimes the least important part of the entire experience.
You have to have all the elements, and me and Matthew talk about that all the time. You know, he's all about hospitality. You know, whatever the guest needs within reason, let's get it to him. But if you have great food and you treat it like shit, you're probably not going to go back. If you have, you know, great service and okay food, you might go back, you might not. But if you have all of them, you know, great vibe, great service, great hospitality, you know, it's just like becomes more of a successful product than leaning into one and not worrying about the other. That's where I think like a lot of ego gets involved when, you know, we're not going to do this or, you know, but I think with COVID also, it kind of like flipped the script a little bit of these restaurants that are opening now. It's like, this is all we have, you know, this is the
experience is gone.
A 25,
down the experience.
Yeah, this is a 25 seat restaurant. This is our menu. This is what we got, you know, either you want or you don't. And if you don't, there's a line of people outside the door that do. So, and I feel like.
Do you think that feeds into chefs' egos though? Like,
I don't say it feeds into chefs' egos. I think it just feeds into, I don't want to say like restaurateurs and chefs taking control of the restaurant industry, but I feel like it got a little bit out of control.
I mean, I thought like there's some chefs I thought who did a really good job of being able to look at their restaurant as more than just the experience, more than just the service, more than just the food, more than just the people.
Right.
And, you know, got to sell this entire thing as a brand. And I think it was mostly chefs who had capital behind them, which is why we are in kind of the age of domination by restaurant groups. But like, do you need to order is a steak from Gibson, does it taste better at home? It doesn't.
Right.
Like, I would argue that when you, like, Gibson's they are a brand, and when people are buying it is because they kind of miss that part of the restaurant experience of having a martini that's technically wrong, but it's the best martini.
And it's a gallon.
Yeah.
You know? Or
Vodka.
your server's been there for 50, your server's been a server there longer than you've been alive.
Yeah.
You order and they put 3 loaves of bread down on the table. You know, they're upcharging you to get the lobster tail because they're making you feel inferior. Right, you're gonna take it home, right?
You know, well, and they did, and people did, because it still made them feel connected to this brand that but they really didn't need to. You know, it's not like they were offering anything unique in the overall landscape of what they do.
But that's also an institution. I think they're in a different category than a small chef-driven restaurant.
That's Supercana International.
That's trying, exactly. Right.
Even Lula or something like that, right?
Right.
It was the weirdest the weirdest few years of my life, but really that first year. And even like moving it down like from March to September was like the weirdest time of my life.
Yeah.
So I would just drive around all day and talk to, like, you want to see egos come crashing down. I think that was that. And it was like chefs who were always too busy to talk to even me, or they were now the only person left in the restaurant. And were vulnerable and open and would talk about it. And as fucked up as it is, I feel like it was really kind of beautiful.
It was amazing to see restaurants pivot.
Absolutely.
I think
absolutely.
I always said I think Alinea Group was like the model for, you know, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. And then you saw a lot of restaurants like, oh shit, okay, like here's some options that we can do. And some people closed and, you know, played it safe, and that's perfectly fine as well. And then other restaurants really seized the moment and pivoted and let's fuck it, we're going for it, you know?
I mean, I think if we're talking about stripping things down, you know, a lot of people, you know, most cooks didn't get into it so that they can plate food into a paper box. And now you have to.
Right.
You know, like Galit was like, we will never do our hummus to go. And next thing you know, they're like, hummus to
How
go?
many pounds can we put you down for? You know?
But so I think it really did strip the pretension away. Like Alinea doing to go for home. Are you fucking joking me?
Right.
Like,
but how epic was it? You know?
Yeah, but could you imagine 10 years ago somebody saying, I got Alinea to go home?
I got Coco Van from Grant at home. From Grant, yeah. So let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. Would you say at Cappered was how you got exposed to Regalis?
100%.
Okay, tell us about what Regalis is.
Regalis is a specialty importer and distributor. Started in New York 10 years ago. Now we have offices in Chicago and Texas. I could say we kind of each have our own personality. So I'll only really speak towards Regalis Chicago, but our focus kind of always been on the kind of the luxury and the high end truffles and caviar and Japanese imports, like a lot of wasabi and uni. And, during COVID, we really spread out. We do a lot of cheese and a lot of seafood now, fresh seafood, where the focus more was on frozen and uni really kind of being the majority of it. And now it's a lot of wild fish, mostly domestic, and then kind of imported farmed programs. So
What attracted you? So making the transition from cook and a chef to salesperson, if you would, is that
I'm the sales director.
Sales
here.
director. So
on the supply side.
What was that mental process like?
It was difficult. So much of my identity and so much of my ego was tied to what I did for work. And, I was like, felt kind of at a loss. We were in Nashville, and my wife is a therapist and kind of always works on the sexual violence and trauma side. And living in Nashville, I think she was just very keenly aware that this is a cool progressive town, but we're in the South. And, some of the systematic barriers she would find herself up against, specifically with the police, who, she'd hear things like, "Are you sure you want to ruin this boy's life after he's raped her client?" It's like, oh, we have to get the fuck out of here.
Jesus.
So then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go back to Chicago. And I didn't know where I wanted to work here. And I didn't know if I wanted to cook anymore. I was 30.
Was Capper that bad that after working there, you didn't want to cook anymore?
Honestly, probably the opposite.
Yeah.
I felt so... I've loved every team that I've ever worked with, but I felt like our team was really, really, really close. I just didn't, it's like, I didn't think that I'd get a better job than I had. And I didn't want to come back here and open just another restaurant. And I didn't have money to do that. I still don't have money to do that. I just didn't care as much anymore. It was like I could go and work at another restaurant, and then what? Like, I'm 30. There's, I was getting older and seeing everybody else get younger. It just kind of, I felt burnt out and I was done. And you kept asking me, like, where are you going to work?
Yeah.
And I didn't know, and you thought I was hiding something.
No, I didn't think that.
You're like, are you going to work at Oriole? I was like, no. And then you were like, are you going to work at Regalis? I was like, is that an option?
Yeah.
You're like, I'll introduce you to a couple people, because we were a great Regalis customer.
Yeah.
And I got hooked up with Benjamin Rogers, who's my boss, and he sent me an email, and he's like, well, I'm not really in a position to hire anybody right now, but let's meet for a cup of coffee. And generally, in that situation, I normally be like, yeah, well, I tried. I guess I'll just go and work at a restaurant. And Allie was like, go and just go have a cup of coffee. Who cares? And wound up meeting Ben and having a really good meeting with him. And yeah, I started working with him 2 weeks later.
Nice.
So on October 25th, which is my birthday. It was my first day. And that was 4 years ago.
Right on.
And I was the third person, and we just hired our 10th person.
Mm-hmm.
So we've grown exponentially in 4 years.
How do you source products for a company like that? Because you guys find obscure things every once in a while, you know?
Yeah. So a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's people reaching out to us like, hey, we have, I run this fish farm. Will you take a fish? Will you take a case and check it out? Or I'll say Instagram is one of the more important and frustrating tools in my life. Like, if I start getting a lot of emails from chefs asking about something, I'm like, all right, did Renee Redzepi post? Somebody posted something about
Sea buckthorn.
Yeah, because I'll get 10 text messages that day about it, and then it's, I'll call Ian, who's the owner of our company, or I'll just start looking around different vendors. I'll start making phone calls, seeing if I could find it. Is there already an importer who's bringing it in the country? If there's not, what does it look like to bring it in the country? Does it make sense? How many people are asking about it? If it's one person with a 12-seat restaurant, right, is it worth bringing something it in? Is it 20 people asking? That's a little bit more worth it. I'll say the buying is not the hardest part. It's the logistics of getting it from and to.
Yeah.
At our busiest, it sometimes feels like I am just in the logistics game of moving boxes across the world.
You're constantly calling third-party delivering systems, asking where the boxes are.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. We are as much of a buying company as we are a selling company.
Sure.
Like, my list of places I buy from, I personally buy from a couple dozen places, and then my coworker Alyssa, she buys from 3 times that amount. It's the sourcing is as fun or more fun than the selling part.
I'm sure.
Sometimes it's just fun to spend money.
Yeah.
But
you ever get stuck with products? You ever think this is going to be the new trend?
Oh yeah.
We're going to get all of this, and all of a sudden nobody wants it. So what do you do?
There's a couple different things you could do. One of them is, number one, you have to take risks. You are going to make mistakes. Not everything you think is going to take off takes off. And some things that you're like, I'm not too sure about wind up being a big percentage of your sales.
Right.
That happens as much as the opposite. I have a good enough relationship with a lot of my chefs that I'll send them something before I really take a big leap and just say, is this worth it? That is best case scenario, is I'll bring something to Lee Wolin, or I'll bring something to John Shields, or I'll bring something to any of the chefs that we work with, and they're like, this is good.
Right.
Like, we would buy this. Or I hear the opposite. So then, worst case scenario, you bring in a pallet of something, and next thing you know, you're like unloading it at a loss, but it's better to lose a little than lose everything.
Sure. Yeah.
You try to find the right home for something. Sometimes the issue is price. Hey, I really like, this Australian octopus, but I'm not going to spend $16 a pound on this.
Right.
It's a game. The whole thing is really it's a crapshoot half the time, but it's also kind of looking around and seeing, the European markets are usually ahead of the American markets, but you always want to be in a position where you're like setting the trend instead of trying to catch up to it.
Right.
It just doesn't always work out that way.
No kidding. Yeah. What techniques, or I don't know, technique's not the right word. What tools that you have in your arsenal as a cook and a chef that set you up for this? Because we all know the salespeople that walk in with a polo shirt on and a brochure, and it's God bless them, but it's like, I used to be a chef too, so I understand. We all know those guys, but I think you're a little bit in a different category because A, you actually were in the trenches, and B, you're selling high-end ingredients to people that want it. So how did that set you up from going from chef to salesperson?
I'll say that when I came in as a salesperson, I didn't know anything.
Dick about sales.
I still, like, it's purely intuition based. But
also, you're not selling cases of frozen boneless skinless chicken breasts.
No,
also, right?
No.
You're actually selling things people want.
I hope so. Yeah. Every single part of being a cook influences how I respond to this job now. And that's why I mostly hire cooks, because I can, that's the language I can speak. I know when is the right time and when is the wrong time to show up. Mm-hmm. I know how to talk to people. I know, I fucking hate pushy salespeople. Yeah. I hate them now as a salesperson when they're trying to push something on me. And I really try to not give that same, Gil from Simpsons energy on to people. I really try, I don't know, you try to mirror other people's, not behavior, but saying fuck is the most divisive thing, right? Either it's going to make somebody really uncomfortable, or it's going to be like, all right, thank God. Yeah. Now we've cut through the bullshit. Now we can talk to each other like people. And, so I try to use it immediately. Hey, I'm fucking Steve. How are you? Well, I try to, I try to be seen as a person and not just a representative of the company I work for.
But don't you think it's a little easier when you're walking into a place with white truffles to get someone's attention?
Yes and no.
Yes and no, yeah.
Truffles can also be alienating because, some people either have a loyalty to somebody else.
Yeah, good point.
Which is truffles are extremely relationship based. Mm-hmm. Or some people, when, I try to say you don't have to buy them. You want to see them. Mm-hmm. And most cooks are yeah, let me see those.
Just smell them.
But a lot of people are feel like we're not that kind of restaurant. Uh-huh. And they almost feel alienated by it. So, if I ask once and I get a negative reaction, I'm probably not going to ask that person again.
Right. Yeah, good point.
It's really it's kind of in anticipating people's needs, but it's more just remembering, not restaurants aren't a monolith. It's not just, this kind of restaurant and this kind of restaurant. It's each individual places that you think should be a huge customer on X, Y, or Z. Maybe they don't buy that thing from you because they don't use it. And then the other way around. I have people who buy truffles that I never would have thought were going to be those kinds of customers.
Do you ever bring a product in and say, this is going to be so great for this restaurant? And then they're like, we don't want that.
Absolutely.
All the time, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'd say that happens as often as it works out.
What do you think the breakdown is in that? If you think something's so perfect for a restaurant, is it just more your ideals of what you think that chef would want, or how you see, let's say you're bringing in some, amazing seafood, and you have a seafood restaurant in your program, and you go and you try to sell it to them. They're like, yeah, we're not interested in it.
Like a lot of times it's that the chef, I'll use Smith as an example. Like, Smith doesn't need us. Mm-hmm. We provide a service for Smith. We're more like the conduit in between the thing they want and the people that they're serving. Mm-hmm. But like, it's very different from other chefs who kind of use us a little bit more for guidance, for inspiration, who will pick up the phone and be like, what's new? What do you got? Versus like, hey, I want this thing. Can you get it for me?
Right.
And very often those restaurants that are more nailed down into their identity, or maybe were open before us and have, like, they get X from me, not X. I don't sell X.
I'd like to buy some.
Like maybe they get chanterelles from me, but really they could probably buy chanterelles from a dozen people.
Sure.
I'm just here.
Well, so that's a great question. Like, how do you nurture these relationships then? Like, what's your thought process in getting someone to trust you to buy things and from you that you already have that they're using, and then on top of that, getting them to trust you to buy things that you're bringing in that maybe you think that they can use? Yeah,
trust is everything, right? Like, it was, in some ways it was easier when we were small, and it was, there's 3 of us and 3 people who took accounts, and the 3 of us did all of the order entry and all the polls and all the deliveries. Mm-hmm. So it was about, okay, well, I know what Smith wants for chanterelles because they told me, and I'm the one who picks the chanterelles, right, and I bring it to them. That, just like with being a chef, and you have to try to translate your vision into somebody else and try to teach them how to make the same decision-making steps that you do, is the same thing for us. And like, trying to make sure that just because I'm not physically making the delivery, that somebody else who is making the delivery can be my eyes and my ears and my hands, and they can kind of translate what the restaurant wants to me,
right?
And I can kind of push that back.
Oh, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Like I said, trust is everything, and it's really about like, it kind of ties back into the thing that you asked before of like matching the right product for the right person. Mm-hmm. If somebody asks for, and you see it more with wild fish, but if somebody asks for, trigger fish, okay, what are you doing with it?
Right.
Now I know what you're doing with it. I know kind of the idea. I can make the best decision on my end.
Yeah.
So I tell you, hey, there is no triggerfish, but there's really nice jumbo black bass.
Right.
Can you take jumbo black bass?
Or do you ever suggest like maybe that's not the right product for the application? That's a fine line, right?
Yeah, that's hard. There's nothing a chef wants to be told more
by a
than
salesman.
They're wrong. Not to say I don't have those relationships.
Right, but don't you think that being a cook and being a chef from before gives you a little bit more insight in how to make those deals happen?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I would, I try to ask a lot of questions, really so that I can understand, their approach to things as well. This helps for when, when I get a phone call from somebody who's like, I've got sea cucumbers and ocean truffles. Like, do you have an interest in that? And I'm like, I know exactly who to bring those to, because I know what people, I know who can have which approach to what.
Yeah. What products do you have right now or that are coming in that you're excited about?
Really excited about this new French cheese import that we're doing through Bivair. They're producers and exporters and cheesemongers and affineurs and really incredible, all super classic traditional PDO cheeses and Normandy butter. We're in Maine uni season, which we always do every year, but every year I'm just as excited about it as I was the first year. Obviously white truffles, that's my, my thorn and my, I don't know if this is an actual saying, so I'm going to just stop. But it's probably what I spend most of this time of the year thinking about.
That's a risky product.
Fuck, dude. Every second you're not selling them, they're deteriorating in quality and they're shrinking in size.
So what do? You have truffles left over, nobody wants to buy. What do you do with them?
You cry.
Just processing them?
You can't really process whites the way you can't. Like if I have a bunch of Paragords at the end of the week,
the black truffles.
Yeah, I'll freeze them and I'll sell them later. Yeah. And I'll sell them for about the same price that I sell them for fresh.
And the white truffles don't freeze well.
They don't. So really what you do then is you try to always have a home for people who will buy B grade things. Like selling your most premium product is big and it's important, but finding somebody who knows what to do with the less desirable, I'd say, is as or more important. Yeah. It's great when those are both the same restaurant, but it's usually not. But you need one for the other. Like everybody has a role to play. And the person who takes the chanterelles that you had to sort out to make the most perfect mushrooms.
Your little buttons,
So you had to put all the shredded ones into another box. You need to have somebody who will take all the shredded ones. Who's they dry them out or they make oil from it, or something, they make Jenner makes ice cream from it, or Smith makes oil from it, or Lula chops it up and they make pasta. They'll put it in pasta filling. Yeah, like that is as important as somebody who is putting 3 perfect buttons on their plate. That is best case scenario with white. Yeah. Best case scenario with white truffles is you sell them all right now the day you get them. Yeah, right. The scenario that comes up as often is, okay, well, these ones aren't perfect. Who will take them? Yeah.
What trends have you experienced in the post-COVID world with the restaurants?
Private chefs.
Really?
The number one.
No kidding.
The amount of really incredible and talented people who left the traditional restaurant structure. And I guess not just private chefs, but, I have a couple Michelin-starred chefs who are doing the corporate dining for one of the largest companies in the country. I have a couple other Michelin-starred chefs who are doing like a meal delivery service, like a meal kit service. And then, personal chefs and private chefs. I mean, Simon Davies is doing private chefs when he could easily have the biggest and best restaurant in the city of Chicago.
How sustainable do you think that is now that things are open back up? Obviously, restaurants are opening,
I guess time will really tell. I think people who are going the more corporate route, people who are going to work at Whole Foods, that seems really sustainable to me. I unless you are the chef for a really wealthy family, there's like, on the hierarchy of wealthy people, there's like, people who are so rich they don't eat at restaurants. Like, they'll eat at like the mediocre country club that they pay $150,000 a year to be a part of, on top of the $250,000 a year or $250,000 they got to be a member in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, all these people don't care about the food. It's the conduit to whatever else they're doing. Those are the people for whom having somebody in their house that will make the decision and cook the food, and then that'll have lunch and I don't have to think about it all week.
Right.
If you can get with somebody like that, then you probably don't need to be back in a traditional restaurant. It didn't really burst the restaurant bubble the way that I would have thought it would have. I don't have data in front of me to say how many restaurants there are today versus in 2019. But my guess is there's probably not.
It's almost back to business as usual.
It's almost back to business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There are an insane amount of openings. The biggest trend also is the rise of the restaurant group. Let Us Entertain You has been on a hiring frenzy and hiring a lot of incredibly talented people.
But where are they finding these people, man? Because everyone that I talk to,
restaurants.
Yeah, but everybody I talk to is we're looking for cooks. We don't have cooks. Every time I open up,
they're hiring managers and not hiring cooks.
Yeah, but just okay. But I mean, just in general, you're opening more restaurants. Great, you have managers, but you have nobody to execute all this stuff.
All those cooks are fucking private chefs now.
Right. Yeah. So how is the industry going to bounce back from that? What is the road to, and I always said, like, the trend that I see is like these smaller restaurants opening, like what normally would have been a 125 seat restaurant is now a 60 seat restaurant.
Yeah.
Because even back before the pandemic, there was a shortage where I always said, listen, if you're opening a restaurant, you need 7 cooks. You better figure out how to do it with 5, and you're probably going to have 4. And now it's like, you're opening a restaurant and you need 3 cooks. You better figure out how to do it with 0.
Yeah.
Or 1. So there's got to be a give and take. It seems to me most of these people dipped out of the industry because they had some time to sit on their couch for a couple months and realize that all the stress and anxiety in their life and problems came from their job. And now they realize they could go work at Amazon or, answer phone calls or remind you about your dentist appointment from home. And they're making 2 times as much as they would have made in a restaurant.
Yeah. The myth of like nobody wants to work anymore.
It's complete bullshit. It's bullshit.
I don't know anybody who does that. Nobody wants to fucking work.
Right. And the myth of we gave you $1,200, from the government is
thanks for rent for 1 month.
Yeah, we gave everybody free money. It's like, what are you talking about?
Everybody I know has a job. I think a lot of people came to the realization that they do not see the merit of sacrificing everything for this dream.
Do you think that's going to be the downfall of the restaurant group? Are they not offering enough to retain talent?
I think the restaurant group is offering enough. My fear is that they're the only people who can offer, $20+ an hour, that can offer health insurance, that can offer PTO, that can offer sick days.
But are these large restaurant groups doing the type of restaurants that are going to attract young, talented cooks? Because it always seems...
That's the thing.
Yeah, it always seems like the smaller restaurants create the trends, get the buzz, get the attention, and that's where you want to be. You want to be where the cool chef is doing the most state-of-the-art stuff, and you're actually going to learn something, as opposed to working at a large restaurant group that is attracting the bridge and tunnel crowd. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but when you're trying to retain talent or attract new talent, What are you offering that's different from the 20-seat restaurant that's absolutely destroying it?
You know, like here in Chicago, I'm trying to think of what the new restaurants are that are doing that. Like most of the new openings I can think of are proxy locations. You know, like they're a second restaurant from an already established restaurant.
But isn't that like a carbon copy, a cut and paste sometimes?
A lot of times it is,
Right.
yeah. It's that or it's restaurant groups. You know, you see some really small like opening like I mean Flower Power's been open for a couple years now, but that's two people who are cooking I think some of the city's best pasta out of, you know, a restaurant that's the size of a shoebox. Or people who are, you know, opening up a dinner spot inside of somebody else's breakfast and lunch spot.
Right.
You know, like trying to keep, you know, people who probably got to see COVID as an opportunity to do something with almost nothing, you know, try to minimize overhead. The middle restaurant is the one that is struggling.
Correct.
You know, the 100-seat kind of neighborhoody. I mean, you don't see that many tasting menus opening up right now.
I always said that it's an amazing time to own a restaurant right now that's already established because everybody's going out to eat, everybody's spending money. It's extremely difficult to get one off the ground.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I guess we'll have to ask you about
I'm in the middle of it right now, so I'm telling you from experience, you know? So, I mean, what a career so far that you've had. Yeah. So what's next, man?
I'm going to do this as long as I possibly can.
You enjoy it?
I love my job. I feel really privileged to, you know, like when I first started working this, you know, I felt a lot of guilt and a lot of shame around leaving.
It's a hard transition.
It's a really hard transition. Yeah. And especially like, my identity was so tied in with being, you know, not a chef, but a cook. Like, it was my identity. And I think a lot of the negative parts of that as well. I didn't really have a lot of hobbies outside of it. I didn't really have a lot of interests or likes. I didn't talk about that much outside of cooking.
What kind of hobbies do you have now?
I'm still learning.
Yeah.
You know, 4 years in. I mean, I love architecture. I love design. I love history. I love things that I can rabbit hole on. Motorsports. I've gotten really into
drag racing,
Formula One.
Yeah,
and, you know, super into, you know, Jewish history and Jewish food and just things that I can like really like. I can spend weeks diving into and then realize I still know nothing.
Sure. Right.
That, you know, that and we bought a house and, you know, like that takes up more of my energy and attention. Yeah. And I have dogs. I couldn't have pets before.
There you go.
Really.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like my dogs are definitely like my babies. And, you know, I sacrificed a lot for a long time to be a cook, and you know I can't tell you how many weddings and funerals and concerts and
everything, birthdays,
showing up for people.
Yeah.
And I feel like I get to show up for people in a way now that I couldn't before.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a good feeling, no?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I get to do that without sacrificing things that I am passionate about.
Sounds like you have good balance, or getting there.
Getting there, you know, like I wouldn't say it's like, you know, like Ari Weinswig from Zingerman's has this thing where he talks about work-life balance and how that's a myth, and I very much agree with that. Like my work and life are so intertwined together. You know, if I'm eating at a restaurant that's a client, like, am I at work?
Good point. I think as a cook, we're always working.
I'm always,
As a salesman, you're always working,
Yeah.
especially if you're in a restaurant. You know,
It's very performative, right? Like, I'm always going to have work on my brain, kind of. But at the same time, when I am working, I still get to be myself, and I still get to show parts of my personality that, you know, it's probably why I like cooking. Like, it's such an intimate, you have such close relationships with the people around you. Like, you really want to get to know somebody, like work a station with them.
right?
Like, you'll get
like
to see
being in
what they're
battle.
like.
It's
God,
like
you
being
get to
in
see what
battle,
they're like
yeah.
when they're at their best and at their worst.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
more so than when you're in a relationship, like
Yeah.
a romantic relationship
I
with
agree.
somebody, you know? But yeah, I'm gonna roll with this as long as I possibly can. They'll have to pry me out.
Amazing.
You know?
If somebody wants to find you, where do we find you at, Stephen?
Um,
Somebody wants to buy big chanterelles from you.
My Instagram is king_newcomer. Steve at regalisfoods.com. Usually driving a little Kia Soul that says Regalis all over it.
Nice.
And, I'm pretty easy to find in this city.
Right. Well, it's great talking to you, Steve.
Cheers. Thanks for
Super
having me on.
insightful. Thanks for sitting down with us.
Appreciate you.
Cheers.
All right. Bye.